Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Steven here with Team Euphoric, and this is day 3 of the 80 days to your dream body. Your protein source for today is going to be ribeye steak. We're training legs and abs, and the theme for today's video is going to be needs analysis. So I'm going to be taking you through various assessments that you can incorporate depending on what your goal is so that you can achieve your goal. Now let's get started. While we're resting, we are going to discuss the theme of today's video, which is going to be performing a needs analysis. Analysis is essentially performing an assessment, and depending on what exactly your goal is, that's going to dictate which types of assessments you perform. Regardless of what your goal is, there are millions of different goals. It's going to fall into one of 3 categories. People either want to look better, feel better, or perform better. With regard to the first goal of wanting to look better, it's going to come down to 2 things. People either want to gain muscle or they want to lose fat. So with regard to this one right over here, the most important things to do are going to be 1, you want to get their starting weight. That way you have an idea of where exactly they're starting from. And you want to get some pictures. Ideally, when I do this with my clients and patients, I take 4 pictures, 1 from the front, 1 from each side, and then I take 1 from the back. And you always want to take it behind the exact same backdrop, same lighting, same time of day, because you want to be able to look at the pictures and have no differences with regard to any external factors. Then, aside from that, if it is your goal to either lose fat or build muscle, one more thing would be performing a body composition analysis. For myself, I prefer to use the skin fold caliper method, and more specifically, I do the biosignature modulation method that was taught to me by Charles Poliquin. It is a 14-site skin fold assessment, and depending on where exactly people store most of their body fat, it's going to correlate to different hormonal imbalances. So if we know that there is a particular fat distribution, we have an idea of what hormones are out of balance, and then we could cater a specific training program, nutrition approach, and also lifestyle interventions. But that is it for the rest period. Time for set number 3. And while we're resting, let's continue our discussion on needs analysis, and specifically, let's get back to the caliper method that I myself use. It is the 14-site skin fold assessment that was taught to me by Charles Poliquin back in 2010, and the 14 sites are the chin, the cheek, the pec, the bicep, the tricep, the subscapular, the Australian or the low back, the mid-axillary, the suprailiac, the umbilicus, the quad, the knee, the calf, and the hamstring. With regard to these sites right over here, if you're not sure how exactly to administer a caliper assessment, you could check out on my YouTube channel. Just search Team Euphoric Skin Fold Caliper Method, and there will be a few videos on how to measure for men and women. The only difference between men and women is for women, when you are measuring the chest, you would measure two fingers from the axilla, whereas when you are measuring the chest for men, it's 2 from the nipple line. For obvious reasons, you can't do that for women. However, with regard to the actual skin fold caliper itself, everything should be done on the right side of the body. The only time you would ever measure the left side of the body is if there is some type of scar that's going to prohibit you from measuring accurately on the right side. And with regard to the actual skin fold calipers, you would want to invest in a good high quality pair. I use the Harpenden calipers. These ones are absolutely terrific, and they are a little bit pricey. They're going to run anywhere from $350 to $500. I ended up spending $500 on these all the way back in 2010. But that was 500 Canadian. If you're American and you could find them for about 300, that's a really, really good deal. But that's pretty much it. Time for set number 5. And while we're resting, I've just got one final thing to note on the skin fold caliper methods before we move on to other various assessments that you can perform. With regard to the skin fold caliper method, it's only going to be as accurate as the practitioner who is administering the test and also the algorithm that is being used. With regard to the algorithm that I use the one from the Metabolic Analytics. That one is trademarked by Charles Poliquin. And if you want to take something like the biosignature modulation course or the Metabolic Analytics, that is the only way you will have access to those algorithms. The courses are quite expensive, and there's also a renewal on the software. It costs a minimum of $250 US per year. So if you don't want to spend that money, between 2004 and 2010, I was using the Perillo method. If you go on linearsoftware.com, that's linear-software.com, there are several different methods. There is the Jackson Pollock 3, 4, and 7-site methods, as well as the Dernan-Womersley 4-site method. Me personally, I hate all of those. The reason that I hate them is that I find them terribly inaccurate, and it's often going to underestimate the body fat percentage. One of the reasons is because it doesn't take into account a patient's weight, height, age, none of that stuff. All it takes into account is the skin fold. So if you have a 500-pound person or a 200-pound person, as long as the skin fold measurements are the same, the body fat percentage is going to show up the same. Whereas the Perillo method, it actually takes into account the patient's weight and their gender. And also it is 9 different sites, so it's going to be a lot more accurate because you have more different distribution sites to work with. With regard to the 9 sites, it is going to be the chest, the bicep, the tricep, the subscapular, the low back, the suprailiac, the umbilical, the calf, and the quad. But that's pretty much it. Time for the fifth and final set. And while we're resting, let's continue our discussion regarding needs analysis. It doesn't matter what your client or patient's goal is, if it's to look better, feel better, or perform better. Ideally, you would want to perform some type of postural analysis. And the postural analysis is going to be very, very important. You would want to take it from the front, and just like the progress pictures, you're going to take 4 sides. Left side, right side, and then you want to see them from the back as well. The reason the postural analysis is going to be very, very important is because it's going to allow you to know which muscles are short and tight and what needs to be stretched, and which muscles are very, very taut and need to be strengthened. With regard to the postural analysis, I ended up creating this when I ended up teaching for the program design course that I ended up creating back in 2018. And this is the handout that I give to the trainers whenever they come to me. The actual assessment itself, I'm going to focus just on the postural assessment for right now. But there are 4 columns. The first column, you've got the front view, the left side view, the right side view, and then the back view. And the way you would want to perform a postural analysis is from the ground up, and that is exactly the way that it works. With regard to all of the different postural faults, they're all listed here, and all you would have to do is check to see which postural fault you are observing, and then you would just check off if you observe it on the right or left. I'm just going to take it up to the screen, that way you could actually see what exactly this looks like. And for those of you that are interested in this handout right over here, if you join my Carnivore Coaching Community Facebook group, you can download it as a downloadable PDF. The link is in the description, so you can go ahead and check that out if you are interested in performing postural analysis or if you are interested in becoming a trainer. But that is it for the rest period. On to set number 3. And while we're resting, let's continue our discussion on performing a needs analysis. Once we have performed the postural assessment, the next thing that you would want to do is a movement assessment. The type of movement assessment is going to depend on the type of client or patient that's coming to you. If they don't have any type of pain or nagging injuries, and they're coming more just for fat loss or muscle hypertrophy, then you don't need to do an incredibly comprehensive movement assessment. All you really need to do is assess their primal patterns. So your squatting, lunging, bending, pushing, pulling, and twisting movements. You want to pick exercises that you're going to be performing with them in the workout, and you want to see how exactly they are able to perform them. That way you know if you can either progress the exercises, or if they're unable to do it, you need to know if you need to regress the program, because if you give them exercises that they're not prepared for, you're going to increase the chance that they injure themselves. However, if somebody is coming to you for the purpose of they want to feel better and they have a lot of pain, you're going to want to get a lot more comprehensive with the movement assessment. In that case, you would want to go through all of the various joints, and you would want to do some passive range of motion assessments, some active range of motion, just to see what they could actively do with their own body. And then depending on the condition, if you are qualified, you would want to perform some additional testing, like some neurological screenings, and you could do some stuff like some dermatome testing, some myotome testing. I have a bunch of assessment videos on my playlist. You can check out the assessment series playlist. If you are a channel member, every single one of those assessments is available to you, and there are over 100 different assessment videos. So it goes from the shoulder, the hip, the knee, the ankle, every single joint in the body, how exactly to assess it, and what equipment you need. But that's it. Time for set number 4. And while we're resting, I'm going to be showing you what is inside of my assessment case. The first thing that I'm going to show you guys is my check caliper. The check caliper, this is going to be used for measuring forward head carriage. Really great tool. A lot of people, they have a lot of neck pain and upper back pain. And a lot of times it's going to be due to forward head carriage, especially because everyone's always in this hunched over position at a computer, driving, eating. The next thing in my assessment box is going to be my check inclinometer. This is going to be used to measure the first rib angle and also pelvic tilt. A lot of people, they have a lot of issues with low back pain, and a lot of people have excessive anteversion. Ideally, for men, you want to see 4 to 7 degrees, and for women, 7 to 11 degrees. The next thing in my assessment case is going to be an inclinometer. These inclinometers are terrific for measuring spinal curvatures and also spinal rotation. Next, I have a goniometer with a bubble level attachment. This is going to be used for measuring joint range of motion through active and passive range of motion. The bubble inclinometer is great. The bubble attachment, if you have an inclinometer and you find it a little bit difficult to get an accurate reading, invest in a bubble level attachment. Next, I have my hammer, the reflex hammer. This is going to be used for checking the tendon reflexes to see if they have any type of issues with regard to pathology in various joints. And then lastly, I have the pinwheel. The pinwheel, this is going to be used for dermatome testing. With regard to dermatome testing, you would just lightly apply it over the different skin areas, and then based off of how exactly they feel it, the level of sensation will dictate whether they have some type of neurological issue. But that's pretty much it. Time for the 5th and final set. And while we're resting, let's talk more assessments. And I'm going to be going over some of my favorite special orthopedic tests. The first is going to be the Thomas test. This is one of my go-to assessments when a patient comes to me presenting with either low back, hip, or knee pain. And it's going to help us to determine if there's any type of restrictions in the psoas major, the rectus femoris, the quadriceps, the abductors and adductors of the hip, and also the lateral and medial rotators of the hip. What you are looking for from the side, the greater trochanter of the femur and the lateral condyle of the femur. For men, it should be parallel or lower, and for women, the lateral condyle should be lower than the greater trochanter of the femur. If it's not, if it is elevated, then that could indicate tightness in either the psoas major or the rectus femoris. The way that you would differentiate between the two is if their hip is flexed, you would passively extend the knee. If you passively extend the knee and then the leg drops, you know that the tension is coming from the rectus femoris and not the psoas major, so you would treat the rectus femoris. The next thing that you would want to do is take a look at where exactly the leg is situated. So you want to look at the femur, and ideally the patella and the anterior superior iliac spine should be in alignment. If the knee is inside of the hip, then that could indicate tightness of the adductors. If it is outside, that could indicate tightness of the abductors. Next, you want to look at the knee. The ankle should be directly below the knee. If the ankle is extended outward, then you know that there could be some tightness in the quadriceps group. It could either be the rectus femoris or one of the other quadriceps, the vastus medialis, lateralis, or vastus intermedius. And the last thing, you want to take a look at what the ankle is doing. The ankle should be directly below the knee. If it is inside, that could indicate tightness in the deep lateral rotators of the hip. If the ankle is outside of the knee, that could indicate tightness in the medial rotators of the hip. The time is up. Set number 3. And while we're resting, I'm going to be going over 2 more special orthopedic tests, and that is going to be the Faber test and the Apley scratch test. The Faber test, also known as Patrick's test, also known as the Figure 4 test, is testing for general pathology in the hip. And as the name implies, Figure 4, you are placing the ankle over the knee and then going into that Figure 4 position. The easy way to remember it is Faber test, F-A-B-E-R. F, flexion, A-B, abduction, E-R, external rotation. So those are the motions that you are checking in the hip. This is just a test for general pathology. So if they have any type of pain or discomfort, it's not going to be very specific and you would need to investigate further. Then with the Apley scratch test, this is another general test. However, this is for the shoulder. When you are doing the Apley scratch test, there are 3 components. You're reaching across, and then as a bonus, you could go up to see if there's any impingement in the shoulder. That's not part of the Apley scratch test though. Part 2 is you are reaching to the opposite shoulder blade and trying to touch. And then part 3, you are reaching for the inferior angle of the scapula on the opposite shoulder. The first part, you are just testing for horizontal adduction. If they can't do that, they've got a lot of problems. The second part, you are going flexion, lateral rotation, and abduction, abduction. So if they have any type of restrictions there, you would want to test the opposite muscles. And then the last portion, you are testing extension, medial rotation, and adduction, adduction. That would just be another general assessment for the shoulder. So if they have problems in any of those motions, you would want to carefully plan what exactly you're doing with regard to their pushing training. So if you're training chest or shoulders, you would want to make sure that you are not doing any movements that would aggravate that. But that's it. Time for set number 4. And while we're resting, let's discuss assessing athletes. If an athlete comes to you and their goal is to improve their performance, a few things that you can do. First is going to be a 1-rep max test. This is going to be particularly beneficial if somebody is involved in some type of strength sport. This is the 1-rep max protocol that I end up doing with my clients and patients. And the way that it works is you want to be able to test them, and between 9 and 12 sets, they should hit their 1-rep max. If they hit it before the 9th set, you rush them too early. And if they hit it after the 12th set, you took too long and it would be invalid. So you would want to make sure that they get their 1-rep max between sets 9 and 12. And with regard to the 1-rep max testing, you are testing the elbow extensors and the elbow flexors. So you want to pick one elbow extensor exercise and one elbow flexor exercise. For the elbow extensors, that would be the bioacromial bench press, incline bioacromial bench press, behind the neck press. And for the elbow flexors, it could be the Scott curl, it could be the chin up, but you pick one elbow flexor, one elbow extensor. You would then go on to test the remedial lifts. The remedial lifts, what you would do is test the accessory muscles to see if they have any type of weakness in their rotator cuff muscles, so the lateral rotators, or the scapular retractors and depressors. Trap 3 raise would be a great one to test for that. Also some type of external rotation like a dumbbell external rotation on knee. And then lastly, you would want to do a muscle fiber dominance test. The muscle fiber dominance test is going to indicate if somebody is primarily fast twitch athlete, an intermediate twitch athlete, or a slow twitch athlete. You would take 85% of their 1 repetition maximum and have them perform as many repetitions as possible. If they're only able to perform 1 or 2, they're a fast twitch dominant athlete. If they're able to perform 9 or 10, they're a slow twitch dominant athlete. And if they're able to perform somewhere around the 4 to 5 rep range, they're an intermediate twitch. The time is up. 5th and final set. Thanks for sticking around until the end of the video. Be sure to like, share, and leave a comment as it'll help the algorithm. And if you enjoyed the content, show your support by subscribing to the channel by clicking on the icon in the bottom right corner. And if you really want to show your support, then consider becoming a member by clicking on the icon in the bottom left corner. These new high quality videos aren't cheap to edit, and the $5 membership will really help with the video editing budget. You'll also get access to a ton of exclusive perks like early access to videos and this program design lecture playlist in the top right-hand corner. And if you want to learn how to do a one-armed pull-up, then check out the playlist on the top left corner.